This particular RCA is the Stinger 4000. It has a directional flag on it. I know immediately everyone says, oh my gosh, copper is not directional. Okay, it's cool, we all know that. It's a twisted pair. There's a drain wire in the RCA, and the drain wire needs to go a specific direction, meaning there's an extra wire that's attached at this end and not at that end, and it's designed to, as a shield, to take all the noise, and it goes nowhere. So that's their idea behind that. That's why they are directional. It has nothing to do with the copper. I'm gonna move on to the one thing that I always forget about, which is the bass knob. Plug that into place, bring that over, and we will add in screw down provisions. We'll bring it in right next to the RCAs. And because we put the head towards the bottom, we can thread right through that hole, get a couple of them in before we tighten them down just to get the wire lined up. Just like the RCAs, make sure you leave enough of a bend so you can easily unplug this. Next on this amplifier is the subwoofer wire. We have some 12 gauge already set up and ready to go with the fork terminals on one end, some ferrules to go in the subwoofer enclosure on the other end. We've used our named heat shrink. In this case we use gray. I like to use gray for my subwoofer wires. The wire that we use for this is 12 gauge. However, it's not the 12 gauge like speaker wire. It is actually just a primary wire, red and black. And the reason why we do that is because we put it in this sheathing. What we found is when you use that thick 12 gauge that's joined together, it makes this very non-flexible. And when running through the car, it's kind of a pain. To us, this just kind of makes more sense. It has a staggered over-under attachment, so we've pre-staggered these to line up. Ground goes on bottom. This is going to keep going following that same flow that we've already established. The last on this run here is going to be the speaker. Power is going to come straight out. I'm going to fast forward ahead and kill the surprise there. But our speaker wires and our remote turn on are going to come in next, and that's going to finish off this run going this direction. For this, we're going to be using speed wire. It's a 9 conductor wire. It has the white, the gray, the green, and purple, as well as a remote turn on. The remote turn on is going to be the farthest away, so that is the wire that we're going to be starting with, and then the rest we'll cut shorter to meet up. For this, to gauge how far out I need my hole to be, I'll just drill my first pilot hole here. Gets me a good reference point. Now I can come back and finish them off, getting my spacing right. On an edge like this, it's hard to get through because you're holding this, so I typically just mark them and then come back and drill them in the end. For the speed wire, prepping it is very important. I like to get the white and grays on top, the green and purples on the bottom, and my blue wire off on its own so that it makes sense when I'm running the wires over. Once I get it the way I want it, I'm going to add a few more holes for the remote turn on. That done, I'll connect the rest of this to the amplifier. The last step is the power. We just need a short ground because there is a ground right here on the seat mount. It's a good place to check when mounting underneath the amplifier is if there is some form of a ground point there. Sometimes there's a threaded input, sometimes there's already a bolt. Makes life real easy. Sometimes there's not. Tighten them both up. Last step is to add in their tie down. Simply just need 2 that just use the existing wire as our spacer. And we're gonna switch to the thicker 8-inch zip tie. The reason I use these, this is a thicker wire. It's gonna have to be more rigid, has more bite, it's a bigger head compared to the little 4-inch here. With the tape off, because we're not going to be drilling any more holes, I can add back in the screw cover. The last step of this is what we call the pre-tune, and that is to validate all of the dip switches and dials on the side of an amplifier to make sure that it's at least ready to get into the car, and if we accidentally turn it on, it's not going to do any damage. For that, turn the gains all the way down. Make sure that, in this case, it's set for subwoofer input. Set our preliminary crossover points to 80 Hertz. And in this case, make sure we turn on the high pass filters for those crossovers. Dust it off, make sure you get all the little pieces of plastic off of it. Get it over into the car, which means I'll meet you over there. And there we go. Amplifier is in place. Nuts have been added to the bolts. Secure it down. This is that area we were talking about. There's nothing behind this. This is just empty space, so it allowed us to come up the side, get into the center console, and bring the wires up into the dash here. And then we have our power wire. That ground is located right here underneath this, right there. we used our positiveground.com system. This system comes with the bolts, the star washers, the nuts for the back if you need them, and all the attachments to tighten up the bolt, make the perfect sanded off area, as well as to drill in a perfect location for your nut. Power wire comes up and runs up behind the glove box and into the firewall right here. It's grommeted, zip tied up into place along with the main wiring harness, and is attached to the battery. Fernando made his cool bracket that bolts into place. It's a double nut here that's holding this, which attaches to this bigger plate that sits on top of the battery, so this doesn't wobble around. Secured in place. This is a Stinger fuse holder. It snaps off and is easily serviceable, so if they need to get to the battery, this makes it super easy to do that. Our speed wire has been brought up into the dash and attached to our harness here and taped up. Fernando is plugging in the wire for the bass knob. And so at this point, everything is moving along splendidly. For the most part, everything is connected. The subwoofer is waiting to go in. We added in the grill so that's nice and trunk proof. That's why I like using the Rockford stuff, because it has that grill and it makes it super trunk ready. So, because let's be honest, people throw tons of crap in their trunk and I don't want you to destroy your woofer. This metal grill will prevent that. At this point, with all the wiring done and everything all set and ready to go, it is time to hop in and get that radio in and start listening to it, checking, and you know what? Let's just hop in and I'll show you what I mean. When putting a radio in the dash, a couple things that you want to think about is, as you can see, there are different lengths to the wiring for whatever reason. It just kind of happens that way. So what you want to do is you want to start with the stuff that is the farthest out in the car and work your way back in. That way, by the time you're here, you have the least amount to install, but it's also going to be the tightest. You don't want to put the tightest thing in first and then try to struggle with everything else. And in this case, the iData is the longest. The pigtail that we have on the back of the radio, that purple white wire we were talking about, plug that in. Our main wiring harness, GPS antenna, USB. Looks like the FM antenna is the closest thing, is like super short, so that'll definitely be last. And while you're doing this, just keep an eye on the wiring so that it's not getting crisscrossed and on top of everything else. The mic on this is a pink plug off of the back. It doesn't go into the back of the radio. Remember, the rear is on top when plugging in the RCAs and the front is in the middle. It's always fun as you're having to push stuff back and keep stuff that's short, plug it in like the antenna, but it's doable. I like to lift the radio up as high as possible. That way I can kind of work all this funness back into the car. This has a couple plugs that plug into it, like this big air conditioner plug, so I want to make sure that I have access to that. We're just going to put 2 screws in to hold it, and now we want to check the radio to make sure everything works. Go through the basic setup on the radio. When you're done, select finish. Play a channel that's just going to give you basic pink noise, just to make sure that you have some audio. And I like to go to balance and fader, make sure that all 4 corners are where they're supposed to be. Test the USB, so it came up charged, which is good, and it's communicating, so we have the right adapter from behind the radio. What's the weather like today?
Looks like it will be partly cloudy today. Daytime temperatures.
Test your steering wheel controls like Fernando just did to make sure that those are doing what they're supposed to. The next thing is, if you're doing a backup camera, obviously check that. In this case, we're not, but we do want to make sure that it appears in the top screen still and nothing got lost there. One of the features of the Kenwood radio is that it will mute the radio when put in reverse, so you can pay attention to what you're doing. You can turn it off if you like, but it's a feature I kind of like. So that gets us pretty much our preliminary testing out of the way. We'll pull this back apart, finish screwing it in. We know balance and fader works because we've already checked that, which is cool. If not, we would check it at this point. We're gonna do some quick, we like to call radio tune at this point, meaning we're gonna set up the time alignment and we're gonna do some quick equalization work, make sure the crossovers were, you know, all that fun stuff. The first thing I like to do is the time alignment. In a Kenwood radio, everything is set to flat out of the box, which is great. Really, most radios are, with the exception of like Pioneer. They're not. You'd have to go in and set them to flat if you're trying to do this. For this, we're gonna play the Sheffield Labs Polarity Pulse track. First step is to go into our settings, go to balance and fader, and move it to the front. Fade it all the way to the front, otherwise centered. Play our track, turn the volume up. It is set to all seats. We want it to just be to front left. Sometimes when you do this, it automatically is good enough for a radio. So we'll test that first. And it's not too bad, but I know we can do better. Go into the adjustment mode. Now what I want to do is set everything to 0, start adding delay. And how you do that on these is you start adjusting the speaker that is farthest away. So in this case, it's going to be the front right, and it will automatically start adding delay to all the other speakers. It's kind of counterproductive, but when you're looking at it, you'll see milliseconds added to all the other speakers, and this one stays at 0. And if you want to do the math, basically what you're looking for is the difference in distance. So let's say this is 4 feet and this is 3 feet. It would be a 1 foot difference. So you could do it with a tape measure and figure it out. But this is just a quick, easy way to do it. That's better. Now we'll fade it to the rear. And the rear is down really low as far as in the rear doors. There's no anything up high. So it's definitely sounding that way, which is fine because it's just rear fill. And now we want to go back in to adjust, and we're going to start adding delay to the passenger rear speaker. And as we do that, we should start to hear the popping noise start to center, and what we're looking for is directly right here in the center of the car. Once we get that to where we're happy, go back to our fader, set it to the center, and we can work the balance of fader to make sure that the rear isn't affecting, but for the most part the center should have stayed exactly where it's at. And we'll fade it to the front just to make sure it's not moving anywhere. All it did was add a little bit more mid to the system, which is expected because we've added 2 more mid bass into it. But otherwise the center stayed grounded where it needed to be. With that part of it done, we're happy there. We'll go into the EQ. Now the EQ has some presets, and that's great. You can bang through some presets if you want, find what you like, see if something sounds good, or if you want to be more precise, get yourself a microphone in some form of I like to use an iPad, use test mic, iTest mic, Dayton mic. We'll all plug into it, into the new USB-C. We're going to use the app called RTA by Studio 6. There's a bunch of different ones. They're all pretty good. The reason I like this one is we can scale by just putting our fingers up and down on the pad, which sometimes make things really nice depending on what you're trying to adjust. And then we'll play pink noise. For pink noise, we use Educar's Test and Tune. Looks like this guy right here on an iPhone. Press play. See how it looks kind of flat, but as we adjust out our range, we can see more where those problems are hiding. The microphone up in the area where you're listening from, kind of moving around to get an idea of what is real and what is fake with you sitting in the car, and then make some adjustments on the radio to compensate for it. Do what you can. Keep in mind there's only 13 bands of equalization for everything. The other thing I like to do is go into the sound effects, turn on loudness. There's a whole conversation we can have about loudness. However, we don't have time. In the Kenwood, there's a couple other things such as space enhancement and stage EQ, which sometimes will add more effect to it. It has bass boost also, which is kind of like their version of sound restoration. Keep in mind, when you're doing a radio, you can make a preset like we just did for preset 1. If they come in here and they start making adjustments on preset 1, they're gonna lose everything we just did. That's just kind of the facts of life as far as that one goes. Kind of a bummer, but hey, you know, when we go to demo the car, we want it to sound the best that it can. And with that, I'm gonna play. And that gets us right where we want to be. Oh yeah. We do some tweaking at the amplifier, adjusted the crossovers a little bit, as well as a touch on the gain here and there just to get balanced the way I wanted it. But other than that, that was pretty straightforward. I'm pretty excited. What do you think, man?
That's amazing, man. I like it.
That's your programmed answer, I feel like.
It is. It is.
Well, hey guys, that's it. We hope you liked this Subaru installation. It was a fun one. Pretty normal system for most of you guys out there. But in the end, it sounds great. Everything was replaced. Top notch. Way to go.
Will you call this a basic system?
I would call this a basic system.
Right?
Yeah. I feel like this is a basic system. By today's by today's standards.
Yeah.
To take this to the next level, would obviously be adding a DSP, more channels of amplification, allowing us to go full active in it, and that would be your next tier up from this. But hey, for most of you guys out there, this is the one, bro.
This is it.
This is it. Fernando, if you please.
On to the next one, guys.
We hope you guys enjoyed this as always. You have a great night, and we'll see you later next time.
Bye.
See ya. No, really, go. It's over. It's over. Yeah, I mean, we got to film another one of these. So just
still
like,
a year?
Yeah, just it's okay. I mean, go watch, go do something else. No, don't really. Stay. Watch the next video.
Watch the next video.
Yeah. All right, guys.